Hello, and welcome back to our series on how to lead a house church or small group. And I hope it's really helping you. Today, we wanted to dive on in and see what we do when we have kids. Some of our small groups may have many kids, others may not have any, and a lot are in between. But at some point, when you're leading one of these groups at one of your gatherings, kids are going to show up. And so, what do? What's the plan? I'd like to start here with a scripture from Matthew chapter 19, and it begins in verse 13. It says, "One day, some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could lay his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him. But Jesus said, 'Let the children come to me. Don't stop them. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children.' And he placed his hands on their heads and blessed them before he left." I think it's interesting in this passage. I would imagine most of these disciples that are following Jesus right here, part of the original 12, were not that old. Maybe many of them did not have kids, and they're like, man, these kids are interfering with our forward progress. And yet Jesus interrupts them and says, no, the kids are important. And I think if we're not careful, we can kind of have the same approach. The kids are kind of interfering, especially if we don't have any ourselves. We can feel like, wow, these guys are just kind of slowing us down. Or maybe we're empty nesters and we're like, okay, that's kind of the phase of life I was in, but now I'm past that now. And then, of course, those that are having kids can often feel overwhelmed by them, especially if they're in a group that has a lot of kids. And so what are we going to do with all of this? I think the first thing is, let's remember the kids are a blessing. We have the opportunity to impact them. We can learn what it's like to have kids before we have our kids, if we're on the younger side of that. We can also pass on things that we've learned if we're in the empty nester phase and help teach the other parents to raise great kids. And of course, as parents, we can be learning and trading ideas with each other. And in the bigger picture, all of us can work together to raise these kids up. Because if they're brought up in the way of God and understanding His Word and appreciation for Jesus, the odds of them becoming Christians is so much higher. And really, we'll be able to raise people that can transform the world. They don't have all this baggage behind them because of the blessings of being raised in the church. And obviously, no upbringing is perfect, but often it can set them ahead and be in a position to help many more people. And so I think it's important that we view it as a blessing. But say we get to the point where we're like, okay, it's a blessing, but what am I going to do? I have a bunch of kids. And I think that is the challenge. Now, sometimes we don't have very many kids, and it's very easy just to keep them in throughout the whole lesson, and whether we're praying or doing a discussion or teaching or whatever, that it's really not that hard to integrate them in. Other times we have a lot of younger kids, and I think that's probably where the biggest challenge is. But then again, we can still include them in for a large part of our service. Maybe when it's time to break out into some specific prayer or a lesson, have a couple of the adults take them in another room and have some sort of planned activity for them. I would really recommend that you send adults. Please don't send high schoolers or middle schoolers. Many of them are not that mature. They're just learning about life themselves. And so I think the responsible thing to do is to always send adults in. And you can go ahead and keep those high schoolers and middle schoolers in the lesson. Every day they're facing challenging situations at school, decisions they have to make about drugs and sex and whether to be deceitful or honest and so many other things that the lessons we're giving are going to be very appropriate for them, and it will help guide them and teach them and explain the gospel. So I would really encourage you to keep them in the whole time with the rest of the group. Every once in a while, maybe you want to break out and do something special for them. But I think learning how to participate with the family, seeing mom and dad talk and share, and obviously there may be some times we want to do some specific things that you need to break them out. So of course, use wisdom. But in general, I think you can keep them in. And they get to learn, they get to share. It's really, I think, a win-win for everyone. But for those little ones, make sure that you're taking care of them at the appropriate time, but always that they're under proper guidance and supervision. And I'd like to add one last thought. Ephesians 6, 1 through 3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Okay, so this commandment had a promise, and it was so the children would enjoy long life on the earth. Do you believe it's important for the children to obey their parents? Do you believe it's important for your children to obey you if you are a parent? I think this is a crucial thing that is often getting swept aside in our society today, is that children don't really need to obey. It's okay to talk back. It's okay to not do what you're told. And I think really this is an opportunity to instill in yourselves and in your small group the kind of parenting that will train the children to obey. When children are trained to obey, they're a much greater joy in these groups as well. And so I would really encourage you to study this out and to develop a conviction that our children need to be trained in obedience. Life will go so much better for them. And if we don't train them in obedience, the world eventually will. And the world is a much harsher teacher. So let's be a group of people, a small group that loves our kids, that trains our kids, is excited to see our kids, and teaches them about the wonderful things of our God. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.